Everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, August 2nd, 2020. And I'm thinking at one of these days, especially without perhaps letting everybody know, we should just not do the opening. And then everybody would see like Shannon and me just
having a dance party.
Oh, how's everybody doing? I'm your host this week, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week she's back, and this is her first official episode as an official co-host of the Atheist Experience, Shannon Q.
Hi, guys. I'm super excited. I'm pumped. I've been looking at the callers. I'm already 5 steps ahead of my mind, wanting to talk to different people about different things. And I am so excited that you guys invited me to be a co-host and that you think I have something valuable to contribute. So,
well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, it'll fly off the rails, I'm sure. I'll ruin everything.
It's a trial period, and I'm pretty sure that during this trial period, I'm more likely to be let go than you are. But so, quick notes for everybody. Yes, we are live, coming to you from, I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. Shannon's coming to you from somewhere
in Nova Scotia.
In
imaginary land, Narnia.
Secret place, so that when Texas and Florida completely destroy the United States, I have a place to escape to. So.
Yeah, and there'll still be a co-host for AXP. So
yes,
that's right. On the backup plan.
By the way, hello to Florida. I'm glad that you're not going to get hammered by the tropical storm. It looks like it's going to stay off the coast, and its winds about 80 miles an hour. So you'll have rains like I did here. Mine only lasted 30 minutes today. I was on Facebook. I was like, holy crap, I don't want to go outside. This is terrible. It was just coming down like buckets. And now it's like sunny and dry. You wouldn't even have known it rained at all. Quick notes today. For any of you who are watching us live on YouTube, instead of Super Chats now, there's just a donation link up at the top above the chat. And 100% of those donations go to the Atheist Community of Austin, YouTube, Google. They don't take a cut at all, which works out much better for us and allows people to donate in order to keep the ACA's mission going. In addition, you can buy merchandise, and there's a graphic that'll pop up right there. You can go to bit.ly/AEN merch. That's Atheist Experience Network, AEN merch, and you can find the stuff you want there. You can also become a member on YouTube, or you can support us at Patreon. And while we're doing this, I want to make sure that people are aware of how potentially difficult this is. We've watched a lot of people do remote shows, remote hosting, remote get-togethers. There's even new technology that allow musicians to compensate for lag so that they can jam and riff together. But what we have is a group of people, an amazing group of people who have managed to have both pilot and co-pilot seats to run the video, the audio, our wonderful crew who are up there screening calls. So please, please, please thank them, send them love and appreciation for all the stuff that they're doing, because primarily the ACA is a volunteer organization. We have 2 employees and that's it. And by the way, I'm not one of them. This is just all us having fun and doing our thing. So we're thrilled that you're here. I'm going to, I have turned over the full reins today to Shannon, and I'm going to do my best to be the grounded Zen master of atheism today. So Shannon, welcome. Who's our first caller?
The first caller that we're going to take is Jenna in South California. So Jenna has a boyfriend who's freaked out by COVID and wants to go back to being a JW and would like to have a chat with us about it. Jenna, you're on the line. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How are you guys?
I'm good, Jenna. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Thank you.
What would you like to chat about today?
Well, I am an atheist, and I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for about 4 years. He grew up born in Jehovah's Witness, and ever since I've known him, he's told me that he would never go back, and, has told me a lot of horrible things about the organization. Well, come to now, he wants to go back to being a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm losing my damn mind.
What's his primary reason?
How to deal with this.
Has he given a primary reason?
He thinks the world is going to end. No joke. He thinks the world is ending right now. He thinks the pandemic is, I don't know, part of the Great Tribulation or whatever they think.
Right.
And he's freaking out.
So he's the reason he wants to go back to being a JW isn't because he actually has a belief in the deity. It's because there's circumstances that are surrounding him that are reinforcing his previous perceptions from being a JW, that the apocalypse is a probability. And so this is a form of confirmation bias that he's having. Have you had discussions with him regarding the differentiations between what's currently going on and what the book actually says will happen, so that maybe if you can point out those differentiations, you can start to reason him out of this perception that he has?
Yeah, I've definitely tried. However, I don't know what happened, but that brainwashing switch just went on in his head. And,
right.
This is the truth, and I'm going to die and all this stuff. So, I want to help him because I love him. I don't want him to go back, but
yeah,
I'm just like, I'm lost here, and I don't really care about the Bible. So, I'm not interested in debating scriptures with him because the Bible means nothing to me.
Right.
So I don't care, so.
So what about all the times where somebody, what about all the times where somebody said that the end is here and they were wrong, which has been every single time throughout history that somebody has predicted the end, which Jehovah's Witnesses have done many times. Everybody who's ever predicted it has been wrong. Why does he think he's more likely to be right?
I guess because there was his family right now is doing the whole love bombing tactic on him, and they're constantly sending him bull crap and scriptures and articles. I guess there was one of the Watchtower publications from 2015 that supposedly predicted the coronavirus.
Oh, I very much doubt
that.
So they're
yeah, I know. Please laugh.
it's retcon essentially. So they're taking previous documentation that's been put out as propaganda by an organization and then utilizing it to fit into the current current climate to suggest that, or infer that it's what's happening now. So have you talked to him about, like Matt said, about the previous failed prophecies? Like the Jehovah's Witnesses have had to redo their organizational structure. I believe it's something like 4 or 5 times because they had very specific dates for the end times. There's clearly a reason that he came out of it initially. So this is a fear response. Like if he would have had that fear at the same time, it just didn't have this sort of external confirmation bias reinforcement that people are utilizing to manipulate him now, by the sounds of it. Is there any way that you can ask him questions about why he previously left and what caused him to come to the realizations that these end time prophecies previously weren't accurate, so that he can have some sort of internal cognitive map of, why he left initially and why it was reasonable to do so, that he can refer back to?
Other things. Yeah. There's a couple other things to address as well, which not just the fact that people have gotten it wrong, because maybe this time he's got it right or somebody else has got it right, but it's worth kind of pointing that out. For me, he stopped believing, and he seems to be being fear pressured into this, not evidence pressured into this. And so if he cares about what's actually true, then not only should he be able to recognize that JWs and others have gotten it wrong repeatedly about the end times, but what kind of God does he believe in that would use a fear tactic to get him to come back to the fold as opposed to presenting actual evidence? If they think the fear tactic and the end times is so obvious evidence for Jehovah, then why doesn't Jehovah just show up and talk to us all? I mean, if they, it's kind of like, it's so obvious, it must be true. And yet we don't see that.
Oh, trust me, definitely. I've said some pretty mean things about Jehovah in front of him, and I don't even know who this person is. As far as the failed prophecies, of course, I brought them up to him, and he's like, oh, well, the brothers, they were just looking into it. They weren't true Jehovah's Witnesses. They were just looking too much into it. It's like they have an excuse for everything. that they got wrong.
Well, that's the thing about when you're lying and manipulating. It's easy to just make up reasons why you got things wrong, which is what these groups of people are doing. If he got out once, there must be, like, from a psychological perspective, there's a reason that he came out. It sounds to me like this is a fear response, that he's looking for reinforcement because he wants some sort of safety. He wants to alleviate this anxiolytic response. So he's got anxiety and he's got fear. And as a result of the anxiety and fear, he's looking for something that's relief. And he sees this as potential relief because he has sort of existential fear that is coupled with it, because now he's maybe facing death in a way that he hasn't previously. So if you can figure out ways for him to grapple with and find coping mechanisms that are better avenues for quelling that fear and dealing with that fear, that might be a good way to go about it as well. Because clearly, from a psychological perspective, this is something that he's doing as a fear response, I would say. And it sounds like, based on what you're telling me. So perhaps addressing that might be a good way to start to help him come out too. Figure out why he previously got out. There's obviously a way that he was able to rationalize his way out of it. And at the same time, address this new component, which is the fear response.
And I would also encourage you, you've talked about Jehovah. That piece of halibut was good enough for Jehovah. How can I make it worse? Jehovah. You can do that stuff. But we got an email this week from someone basically pointing out that they're going stir crazy because of being on lockdown from COVID. And they were mentioning that it's not surprising to them that the suicide rate may have gone up, and that they are worried that there's going to be nothing to live for, that they're never going to be able to hang out with people or go to concerts, or that nothing will return to normal. This pandemic has brought out the worst in some people, the best in some people, the fears of some people, and probably, you can talk to him all you want. Probably the best course of action is to try to be both compassionate and reasonable, and realize that he's dealing with something that is clearly traumatic to the point where you don't even recognize him or his actions anymore, and that this is happening to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people are utilizing that vulnerability to brainwash him. So what he needs a tether to reality, if you can be that for him.
Yeah, I'm doing my best, but it gets overwhelming because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm not trying to. Yeah, I will never, ever, ever in my life become a Jehovah's Witness. And, he's already trying to pressure me and be like, we need to get married and do this right. And I'm like, I would never marry a Jehovah's Witness. Come on now. It's just wild to me. It's so wild.
When I'm recommending the high road, trust me, if you lose your shit and throw a fit and start yelling, you're probably justified just as much as he's justified in panicking, or even more so than he's justified in panicking about end time stuff. Just remember, it's a rough time out there for everybody. And I for one would like us all to strive to be better, but that doesn't mean that you let somebody push you around.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely. Take care of yourself as well. If you get to a breaking point, unfortunately, it is what it is. But hopefully we gave you a little bit of insight on things that we ourselves may try, or a different perspective, because you're in the eye of the storm.
You gave me a lot of it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad.
I really appreciate it, you guys.
I'm glad, Jenna. We are going to let you go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for calling. Have a good rest of your day. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
No problem. She seems so sweet. That's so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart.
We get a lot of email from people who are in relationships or dealing with relationships where they don't necessarily agree on religion. But at a time like this, where you and your partner think you agree, and then the world starts falling apart, and one of you goes a different direction for comfort than the other, that can be I have difficulty imagining that. I have friends who date and have married theists, and it works out. And people for years ask me, Matt, would you consider dating a theist? And generally my answer is no, not that it's necessarily an immediate deal breaker. Yeah. But because for me, relationships are so much about respect and trust that I don't think I could be in a relationship with somebody who seriously believed things that I could not respect. Yeah. And if they did and they had good arguments, then I'd probably stop being an atheist.
Yeah. And at this point in time, too, people are dealing with an unprecedented situation. So they're going to be spending more time with people that they're in relationships with than they ever would have, especially if they share a domicile, and not have as much external one-on-one time with other people. Like there's an inordinate amount of stress. There's so many variables to consider. So hopefully that helps some other people too. The next one, I don't know if the next one's going to help anybody. We're going to talk to Ricky. We're going to talk to Ricky in Atlanta next. I've made the call. Hi, Ricky in Atlanta. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Here, let me just say first and foremost that I appreciate talking to you guys. I mean, I definitely respect you guys tremendously. Shannon Q and Matt, man, I definitely appreciate being given an opportunity to talk to you guys.
Sure. So you think Matt's wrong on morality, eh?
Absolutely. Well, I think not only is Matt wrong, I think that philosophers in general are wrong, and certainly theologians are wrong. I believe that
hang on.
We're trying to. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So you think that I'm wrong, philosophers are wrong, and theologians are wrong?
Everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you happen? I'm not doing this as a promotional thing, but did you happen to hear the episode of Shannon's show with Shannon, myself, and Scott Clifton from like a week ago?
I did. I watched it.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Now we're all caught up on the same page. Teach me a lesson, Ricky.
Let's hear it. Now I can't wait because you've heard our positions, admittedly. So
right.
What's up?
So what I'm saying is that, especially if we're trying to come up with a secular morality, right? Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is that for centuries, theologians and philosophers pretty much got the answer wrong, and that's why they couldn't reach a consensus. So I think it's probably best to try to frame morality, which we all feel instinctually, in a sort of scientific grounding as opposed to a philosophical, conceptual, or theological grounding. I mean, certainly deontology is wrong. If God does not exist, then deontology is clearly false. And I'm saying that philosophers were responding to that, and that pretty much poisoned the well. So when I think of, like, say, objective morality from the position of science, I'm thinking of something objective like gravity or evolution. These things are something that you can't opt out of. It's predictive of all past behavior of whatever it's talking about. It demonstrates what's presently taking place and is predictive of what's going to take place in the future.
Okay, so can we get to what your definition of morality is then? So we have some idea now of where you think we can ground a position of morality, but what I don't have, which I think would be more interesting to talk about, is what you think morality is. I think too many conversations about morality start off with just assuming everyone's talking about the same thing. So can we please start with what you think morality is and how you can ground it?
Yeah, and if I can, real quick, I definitely want to hear your definition in this grounding. But just listening to you, I'm like, you called in to say I was wrong, and yet you seem to be agreeing with me on having an objective scientific grounding for it. So, yeah, give us a definition.
Yeah, what's morality?
Certainly. Okay, morality is, and what I'm saying is historically has been, whatever behaviors that lead to social cohesion is considered to be, amongst a group, is considered to be the good. And every behavior that leads to anything that is disjunctive to societal cohesion was considered to be the bad. Historically,
I will wholeheartedly, immediately, and with passion reject your definition of morality, because you know what can lead to social cohesion? Martial law.
What's that?
Martial law and an elimination of individual freedoms. Getting people to comply leads to social cohesion, and I don't find that to be particularly moral. So your definition of morality is summarily rejected at the outset.
Okay, and I would say that when it comes to martial law, if it does lead to social cohesion, it would be good. But in general, martial law, for example, if the United States wanted to institute martial law now, that would not lead to social cohesion. There'd be a lot of people who would reject.
But your argument is that in an instance where there is social cohesion, it would be good. So thinking about situations where it wouldn't be good doesn't negate the fact that that's your position. If
you define morality as that which whatever behavior leads to social cohesion, that means that the foundation of morality for you is conformity And that will never serve as a foundation for me. So we can disagree about morality all day long, but we're disagreeing at the foundational level, because I only care about social cohesion to the extent that it actually is the result of freedom being exercised with the eye on ultimately achieving a better world. And I'm not convinced that social cohesion is necessarily a path to a better world.
Right. What I'm saying is that historically, a path to a better world was never considered to be what people thought of as moral. I'm saying that if you look
but
at
I don't care about that either.
Contemporary society,
for example, most people have thought, or a good chunk of people have thought, that morality is whatever is consistent with the mind of God, and I don't care about that either. So if I'm talking about well-being. And if that doesn't qualify as morality for somebody else, then I don't care about morality. You have to give me some reason to care about it. And you're starting with whatever behavior leads to social cohesion. And that is not a foundation that I would accept.
I agree. I understand. Now, from my perspective, I'm saying that this, right? And I agree exactly with what you said. But what I'm saying is that historically, if you look at human behavior, the way we behaved, that's what we consider to be good. And anything contrary to that is what we consider to be evil. So in general, I understand your position. Like if you have
Ricky, that's not true. That's not true.
How do you figure?
You just said that if we look at it historically, those things that we did historically are looked at as good. That's not the case. I think that when I look back at history, I see things that were good and things were bad. And I see people pronouncing things good that were definitely bad and pronouncing things bad that were good or neutral. So what happened in the past, how people viewed morality, is not particularly relevant or a barometer of what morality should be. I don't care what people thought was right and wrong in the past. I care about what's actually right and wrong in here and now.
Right. And if you're saying that it has a consistent grounding, one sec, Ricky, one sec, sorry, I apologize. But if you're saying that it has a consistent scientific grounding, for example, then it should be immutable. It should be consistent over the course of time. You shouldn't even have to reference historical perspectives on how people behaved in regard to social cohesion, because that seems to me like what you're doing. It seems to me like what you're doing is you're saying historically people did things that we would maybe consider immoral now, but they achieved potential social cohesion. So we labeled anything that achieved potential social cohesion as moral. And thus, morality to me is anything that achieves social cohesion, regardless of what that activity looks like. Sorry, there's a train going by my house. But that is not, that I don't think that is a really well-functioning version of any sort of definition of morality. You're essentially saying over time people have behaved in a certain fashion in order to achieve social cohesion. I'm going to label that morality and then say that that's grounded in science. But that doesn't inform anything about how people should behave. You don't get to an ought there. You just say how people behaved in respective to this particular goal is morality, but you don't, and we're going to label it that regardless of what that behavior looked like, and not measuring how those behaviors affect other people or why they would be good or bad. We're just labeling any of those behaviors that achieve that goal as moral. And that doesn't ever get you to an ought. It doesn't get you to we should behave this way. It doesn't get me to morality is. It gets me to, based on looking through history, this is what I think morality was, and that's not, and it still doesn't give me a functioning, working, I should behave in accordance to this way. This is good, this is bad definition that I think would be useful in any, but by any perspective of enacting morality in your life, which is I think what should be the most important.
I think I can do that if given an opportunity. I can lay out that case. But I would begin with by saying that the is-ought fallacy is contrived from theology and philosophy, and it has no actual basis. And the reason why I say that is because if we are indeed living in a deterministic world, which seems to be the case which science is laying out, then the idea of what you ought to do or duties is meaningless, because you either are going to do an action or you are not, based on your biological imperatives and your experience. So what you ought to do is irrelevant.
No, but the is-ought Humean induction is not about what you should or shouldn't do. It's about logic in general. So you're just saying you can't get an ought. Yeah.
It's called the is-ought problem because no one has been able to come up with a way to derive an ought from an is that succeeds. Now, I would agree with you to some extent with you saying that if the world's deterministic, then ought becomes somewhat irrelevant. However, you've got an issue with regard to soft determinism, hard determinism, but moreover, we are still thinking agents. and we are still reflective thinking agents. And so even if everything that I've ever done has been determined, I am still, to whatever extent, influenced by the things around me. And so if I'm convinced that this course of action leads to a better world, and I actually seek a better world, then I am the agent that can put that into practice. Meanwhile, one of the things I'm convinced of is that if I can convince other people about a path to a better world, that I can influence them. And determinism becomes irrelevant at that point, whether or not I was predetermined to try to argue morality with somebody and potentially change their mind becomes irrelevant. What matters then is what is. And all we're talking about when we say this is, here's our goal, some better world, whether you think it's social cohesion or I think it's well-being. And what path are we going to take to get there? Which paths lead us there and which paths lead us away from that? And you can't always tell. So how even if you went with your social cohesion definition, which I mean I'm rejecting outright, what foundation can you use to tell people, hey, here's the way we should act to get to what I think is a better world?
That's where I'm at.
Easily. And
okay.
I definitely appreciate everything you said. I agree with everything you said. All right, I would say this. I'm a humanist, right? So
Awesome.
When I look at history, I'm looking at how the problem or where evil comes into play is when, number one, xenophobia is instinctual, right? It helps us from our 200,000 year evolution where we lived in small bands and we had to compete over scarce resources. What I'm saying is that moral progress is essentially us including more people into our groups. And that is what led to the abolition of slavery. That's what led to the more rights for women. This is what led to rights for trans people, because we consider more and more people as part of our group.
What we would both agree that that's good, right?
Yeah,
but why is it good?
But also, I'd say xenophobia is not necessarily instinctual, but I understand what you're saying, and it can certainly feel that way. But I think it's learned behavior, personally, but I could understand somebody seeing it as instinctual. But to what Shannon's asking, you're saying that moral progress involves us including more people in our group. And another way to phrase that would be to say, to break down the in-group, out-group barriers so that we are far more inclusive, so that the entire, all of humanity qualify for the same value in any given situation for an individual, which, by the way, I'm not necessarily in favor of and think is unrealistic, because I'm always going to care more about me and then the people who are immediately in my life, and a little bit more than, yesterday, thousands of people died whose names I'll never know. They died in a place that I'll never visit, that I know nothing about. To pretend that I care as much about them as Shannon or myself is ridiculous. But in an ideological sense, I can say that those people matter and should have the same rights and freedoms under the law and under any system viewing itself as moral, irrespective of whether or not I care as much about them as I do about myself or Shannon.
Yeah, and I agree with what Matt's saying, but I'm still
okay.
From your framework. So your framework is, one sec, Ricky. So your framework is anything that achieves social cohesion is by definition moral. So anything at all. No matter what happens, if it achieves greater social cohesion.
How do you stop me from killing everybody else on the planet except for me and one other person, and then I've achieved 100% social cohesion as long as I picked a person who agrees with me?
Yeah, or 3 or 4 even. Doesn't matter how many.
Social cohesion is what inspired the Nazis, by the way.
Yeah, any authoritarian regime.
Exactly. And I think that's what, and I think that's exactly the point. When we understand that about human psychology, then we could prevent that type of behavior in the future. That's why I say it's predictive of human behavior. So
but it doesn't make it morality.
Criminal activity. Now, what I'm saying is that the morality that philosophers and theologians are talking about doesn't exist. The only thing that we can say objectively is that, number one, human beings who are social animals, is assuming they're not sociopaths, who doesn't have those pro-social biological imperatives like mirror neurons and dopamine and serotonin and gut instincts that tell them not to do something things, feelings of guilt and shame. These are all biological and can be demonstrated and measured objectively in a lab, right? So that's what I'm saying. This is objective morality here. These are instinctual things that we can measure. And social.
So you don't think that anything like morality really even exists then? So you just think that is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. But as defined by philosophers and theologians, I don't think that exists. What I'm saying is that historically, this has always been what we refer to when we talked about morality, and we rationalize it post hoc after the fact. So if we look at, for example, the Bible, if we look at it, the Old Testament, right? Yeah, what I'm saying is that, so the Israelites always thought that they were the chosen people, and that God was for them. Jesus even said that he only came to the lost children of the sheep, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It was Paul and them other guys who said everybody else is included, but Jesus never said that, and the Old Testament certainly didn't say that. So from the perspective of the Israelites, to kill another Israelite was wrong. Thou shalt not kill. But to kill the Amalekites or the Canaanites, that didn't even factor into the metrics of what was good or bad, because they didn't see them as being a part of their social group. So what I'm saying is this explains past events. This also explains, like you said, the Nazis. So, of course, Hitler would have assumed what he was doing was good for the German people. But, of course, the Jews thought he was evil. The British thought he was evil. And we can look back anachronistically and say that.
Because he was.
Yeah, he was.
I'm sorry. You've managed to break down my Zen barrier, because honestly, and I hate to say this, Ricky, this sounds like a bunch of moral nihilistic crap, and a gross oversimplification, because there are people who have done bad things and do bad things, and I don't and should not include them in my social in-group. I don't need to include violent, psychopathic murderers and rapists in my social in-group just for the sake of social cohesion. So you've got this model that wants to, let's break down the barriers between us and them. And my point is that there are still going to and should be some us versus them sorts of things. That's how you make sure that you don't let society devolve to a low, dull, gray hum of apathy and nihilism.
Well, no, I agree with you. So what I'm saying is, if you look
stop calling in to tell me I'm wrong if all you're going to do is agree with me every time I say something.
Well, I agree with you with that part. I don't agree with you with everything. For example, I don't believe that. For example, if we look at, say, the way we treat soldiers and the way we treat murderers, they do the same thing. They both kill, but one are treated as heroes and the others are treated as evildoers, right? One, of course, kills for the benefit of their society, which are the hero soldiers, and one killed for their own, their own ends, which would cause dysfunction in that society, and that's why we leave.
I don't really need this. I don't really need this first grade level education. Either we've got a moral system that you want to advocate, or we don't. But I don't know what the hell this has to do with God or religion, or at this point, even morality. If you're just going to agree with whatever I come up with while also advocating for a moral nihilistic, simplistic notion that all we need to do is break down barriers between us and them. Okay, agreed generally and disagree specifically. I know that's what you're saying, which is why I wrapped it all up in a nice bow before saying goodbye.
Yeah, I think what Ricky's saying is, if I'm understanding correctly, that he doesn't think that anything like morality really exists. He thinks that we've named things through history that benefited our groups as moral, and that's why it's changed over time, and it doesn't exist in any sort of like immutable sense. But it's always been something that was about social cohesion. So I actually don't even think that he's saying that you're wrong, because based on the conversation that you and I had the other day, that pretty much lines up. So I think that it was just like a confusing road to ultimately maybe agreement, really, because I don't think that Matt is wrong based on your perspective, because listening through, it sounds like you guys pretty much hold a similar.
Well, except I'm not a moral nihilist.
Except
and I'm not going to go for
nihilist.
simplistic notions of social cohesion. Right. And I'm not going to say that morality is something that could actually result in the Nazis being on the right side of things. So no, we're not that much in agreement.
No,
I meant
the Nazis are wrong.
You have no basis and no foundation to say the Nazis are wrong if your foundation for morality is whatever leads to social cohesion. You cannot say the Nazis were wrong.
No, what I'm saying is that the highest good, of course, would be for all human beings to consider themselves as a part of the same social.
That's just like your opinion, dude.
Right, and I could justify that too. So I'm saying that that's what we ought.
That's the whole point. You can't justify it.
No. I could justify by saying this, that human beings have value. And because human beings, all human beings have value, of course they do. I even listen to you say the difference between intrinsic and inherent.
They have value. They have value to me, but they don't have any intrinsic value.
Well, let's say they have systemic value. So if they have systemic value, simply because that either they can be Albert Einstein,
but that's still subjective. There's no imperative for any individual to consider another human being as valuable. We just tend to associate with the people who do.
Right. What I'm saying is it's wise that we include more and more people into that circle. And the people who want to reject that,
I would agree.
Who don't want to do that, we can then punish them because they're causing disjunct to our society. So we have a right to then lock them up. We have a right to...
I think that's the right we exercise, but it's not like we have that right intrinsically. You see, there's so many stopping points here that it's like you've got a good idea that just halts. So why don't we stick a pin in this? Right. I understand that you have to talk to other callers. And I think that if we was to go through those points, I would be able to convince you to be honest with you. Maybe not, but I think I can. I pretty much guarantee you won't.
Maybe Ricky, we are going to have to let you go, but maybe like shore it up a little bit. And instead of approaching the conversation as you're wrong, maybe, have a presentation about what you what your morality perceptions are that's a little bit more tied together, because it took us a little while to even get to the point that we knew that you somewhat agreed. So I think that there's a communication gap there, but I'm starting to understand what you're saying. So we are going to let you go. I do appreciate you calling. There's 700 other people apparently that want to talk to us today. And you broke Matt's zen. You did it. Good job, Ricky. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Can I just say one closing thing before
Sure.
I hang up and let y'all move on? Please, sir. All right, I just want to say that I was able to talk about this point more substantively with Ask Yourself on his Discord.
Okay.
I don't know if he's going to post it. I hope he does. But definitely, please, if you can get a chance to ask yourself on his Discord.
I don't know who the hell that is or why I should care. But if somebody shows up and presents that their foundation of morality is social cohesion, and I reject it immediately and point out the problems with having that simplistic foundation, I don't think you're likely to convince me. And I'm not going to be the slightest bit impressed with a Discord discussion that goes down that path. A bad foundation's a bad foundation's a bad foundation.
I think if you got a little more time to think about it, you would agree with me. But I understand.
I think you're wrong. If you come up with something and I tell you why I don't accept it, I don't know what makes you think you can talk to me till I'm blue in the face and all of a sudden a bad idea becomes a good idea, because it just fucking doesn't.
Thank you for calling, Ricky. Call back again. We do have to let you go. It was lovely chatting with you. Have a good evening.
It's not like I didn't grasp the concept. I grasped it immediately, told you what was wrong with it. And you think that talking to me more is going to change my mind? No.
Okay.
I did break my zen, but I don't
totally broke your zen.
I don't think that I'm anywhere near a problematic anti-zen level. So
no,
please,
you aren't. You are.
Pick out a good one.
I'm proud of you, actually. Pick out a good one. Okay. I am going to go. Oh my gosh, there's so many since the last time I looked. Holy smokes! Why do so many people want to talk to us? This is bananas. Okay. James is going to prove that we already believe in God. Let's see. I'm curious about that. Let's do that. James in Maine. We already believe in God. All right, James. Why do we believe in God? I think you might be wrong.
Oh, yeah, this one's for Matt.
Of course.
Hello?
I can still not believe in God. I don't. Matt does, though. Tell Matt why he believes in God.
Okay. Sorry, I heard a beep. And anyways, so to get right to it, because last week Matt said, if someone tells you what their identity is, then you accept it, and that's just the way it is. So then I would say...
Hey, James?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The call broke up a little. I was having difficulty understanding you. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So last week you said that if someone tells you what their identity is, then you accept it, and that's just the way it is. And then I would say, if someone tells you that their identity is God, then you now believe in God, and you have to accept that, because that's just the way it is.
See, here's the thing that you don't understand, James.
No.
Hey, are you ready? If somebody tells me that they identify as God, I'm going to accept that they are telling me honestly what they identify as. That doesn't mean they are in fact God. See, because we don't have any evidence that there is a God, so someone claiming they identify as a God means that they're identifying as something that we have no reason to think exists. Someone telling me they identify as a man or a woman is them identifying as something that we absolutely know exists. So I don't believe in a God. You can try your little trick fuck manipulations of word games in order to make your point and show yourself as an anti-trans bigot all day long, and then we'll hang up on you. Thanks for calling. Goodbye.
Okay, I guess we're hanging up. Bye.
How was that for a Zen phone drop.
That's infuriating to me when people use those types of arguments. That call definitely deserved to be hung up on, because I don't want to explore that path, really, to be honest with you, because people's perceptions of gender are very much real and they're evidence-based, and you can point to them and what leads into those perceptions and how they're constructed. You can do research on it. Somebody saying that they identify as God is not even in the ballpark of the same type of thing. So when somebody thinks that that's a gotcha, that's if you're weaponizing the fact that people are already struggling with these misperceptions because people don't understand what it even means to begin with, in order to attempt to weaponize that bigotry to prove a point that is a foolish, dumb point. So
I'm going to have to make a point that no matter how much I strive to be Zen Master Matt on occasion, if you call in to fat shame people, body shame people, slut shame people, if you call in with bigoted, racist, homophobic, transphobic crap, I will go nuclear on your ass while maintaining my Zen composure. You will leave looking like the ignorant bigot that you are, and we will move on to another caller without any hesitation at all. And I can do all of it without picking up a bong or anything, because you people are beneath me.
We have so many. Wow. Okay. All right. I don't have to go in order, right? I can pick whatever I want.
You do whatever you want.
Rogue. I do what I want. I'm going to do this.
Apart from me hanging up on transphobes, you do whatever you want.
Oh, yeah. You can do that all day. All right. We're going to talk to Mike in California. Mike's been waiting a while. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for waiting.
You believe in the Bible, and the Old Testament and the New Testament are related, and Jesus brought the New Testament. So what's up? What would you like to talk to us about today? Are you still there? Can you hear us? Mike.
This is Mike.
Hi. Yeah. So great. You can hear us. What's up? What would you like to talk to Matt and I about today?
Matt? Is it Matt? Matt Dillahunty?
Yeah. This is the Atheist Experience.
What show did you think you were calling? Yeah. I'm on with Shannon. How can we help, Mike?
I can't believe it. Sorry, I can't believe it.
What? Now, hang on, Mike.
Matt himself.
Mike. Did you know you were calling the Atheist Experience?
Yes, I am. I did.
And you're aware that I am the host of the Atheist Experience? And you talk to us call screener, correct?
Yes.
And despite all of that, you're saying you can't believe you're talking to me? What alternate reality are you in where evidence doesn't work for you, but a lack of evidence does?
See, the thing is, I listen to your videos a lot.
Okay.
And I thought we got cut off just a second ago. And anyway, I'm a Christian, and I'll get right down to it. I loved your video on the Bible doesn't say that, like a few years ago.
Sure,
and
I've done several of those.
I thought, yes, this is the guy we need on our side.
I was on your side, and then I realized that I didn't have any good reason to believe, and I wanted my beliefs to be based on evidence and grounded in truth, and so now I can't believe.
Well, that video still has a lot of good, meaty stuff to it. It gives me, it's got a good method to it, which is the main thing is context. And for example, you started talking about the Bible doesn't say it's okay to have slaves.
No, stop, Mike. I've never said that. You are now clearly a fucking prank caller, because I've said the exact opposite over and over in many videos. In none of my videos did I make a point of saying that the Bible doesn't say it's okay to have slaves.
I thought it did. I thought you were saying that the Bible doesn't endorse slavery, I know that your follow-up videos says that, and this is why I was kind of surprised in your follow-up videos. You're saying that, oh yeah, the Bible does, because read it and you can see it.
Mike, how about you get to my point, or your point, because right now you start off by blowing me about how good my content is, and then you get it wrong, when what it says here is that you believe everything in the Bible, including the Genesis account, and that there's no other life on planet. So get to whatever point you wanted to make, because you already misrepresented my position while trying to applaud it. So get to a point so we can get this over and go to another caller.
Well, I'll just stick on the slavery point.
Okay.
Because the Exodus 21 is mentioned a lot, and a lot of other YouTube videos.
Like Leviticus 25 as well?
Yeah. I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with Exodus 21 just because that was mentioned. And
in my video about slavery, I also mentioned what's in Leviticus as well. But what's the point?
Okay. Well, the point is, when I read that, on the first couple of times I read that, it does feel like, wow, the Bible is inspiring. This is my opinion now. The Bible is espousing slavery. I'm like, and what do I do with that? But then when I read it, and when I start thinking about context, who's the audience? What kind of socioeconomic or environment was
fucking Christ.
What? And
so what does the context have to do with anything? Like?
What context could possibly set it up so that it is morally correct to own another person as property and be allowed to beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days?
It's not.
Hang on.
I'm not saying that it is.
But that's what the Bible advocates.
I'm reading that in the context of that, in the historical context, in the Hebrew.
Okay, Mike, stop. Mike, stop and listen, because you're going to break my zenness. I asked you. You said you looked at it in context, and I said, what context could possibly make it morally permissible to own another human being as property and beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days? Please tell me the context that makes that morally permissible, because that is exactly what the Bible advocates.
No, I'm not saying, okay, so there's no context for that. I'm not saying that that's what the Bible is saying.
I'm saying that's what the Bible says, because the Bible fucking says it.
Well, the Bible also says in the few other verses, if you buy a person and sell them, that you're supposed to be stoned.
And
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. No, it fucking doesn't. Congratulations on completely busting my zen. You don't know shit about your own book. You didn't watch my video on slavery. I go through it verse by verse. The verse you're trying to appeal to is one about man stealing. However, if you read through Exodus 21, it specifically has two sets of rules. One of them for if you buy another Hebrew slave, when you have to let them go, how you can trick them into being your slave forever. And then it has a separate set of rules for non-Hebrew slaves. You shall buy your slaves from the heathen that surround you, and that they become your property to be passed on to your children, and that you can beat them as long as they don't die within a day or two. That's what the Bible says.
That's a very practical way, but I still don't think that's not what God intended.
I don't give a shit what you think God intended. Does the book fucking say what I said it says?
Well,
I swear you have busted out my zen because you are wasting my time and everybody else's time. Am I correct about what the book literally fucking says? Yes or no?
Well, the Bible does not say it's okay to...
Goodbye, jackass.
Okay, we will move on.
So, fuck all that zen stuff. If I read what the Bible says and your response is to say, well, I don't think that's what God meant, you can fuck right on off, because now you're claiming special interpretation, that God's got a wire into your brain that's not in anybody else's, and I don't give a shit about that.
Yeah. The slavery thing frustrates me because it's just so clear cut, I think, that when people attempt to justify it, they have to stop and look at themselves and think, hey, like, why am I attempting to justify something like this?
We made it almost an hour.
I know, you were doing so good. You were doing so good.
I think he was a troll.
Potentially. I think that there seems to be a lot of that. It's probably very difficult to screen for. But next we're going to talk to Shandu, who is in Ontario, another Canadian, and is going to have a chat with us about why non-dualism, or ask us, I guess, if non-dualism is a problem from an atheistic point of view. Can you hear us, Shandu?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So welcome to the Atheist Experience. What would you like to talk to Matt and I about today?
Thank you so much for accepting my call. I wasn't sure if I'll be in the waiting list or be accepted. Thank you. And so I am a Hindu by birth.
Okay.
I have heard Matt and everyone in the show talk about several religions.
Mm-hmm.
But practicing organized religion with the intent of suppressing a group of people or knowledge base is a bad thing. Sorry, I just climbed upstairs, so I'm out of breath.
It's okay. So, what did you want to talk? Yeah, get to it.
Is it okay to practice a philosophy that says everybody is equal, or is practicing a philosophy as a way of life, is that still a bad thing?
So are you asking us, I just want to be clear on what the question is if you have like a worldview, a life philosophy, a way of living that perceives everyone as of equal value, is that a beneficial perspective to have? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, because that is pretty much what non-dualism says, that there are no two things. Everything is one. So if everybody had such a perspective, is that still a bad thing?
So you're arguing that I'm trying to see a few steps ahead to where you're going. So to non-dualism, what do you mean by in non-dualism? Can you elucidate that for me? Because it seems to me that you're asking me if I have a worldview that perceives everybody as of equal value, is that good or bad? And then if I say yes, then you can say, well, I have this worldview that has that as a component, and thus you just said that worldview is good. So before we get to that point, which is I think what you're angling at, I would like to know what you mean by it.
Non-dualism is a ancient sort of branch of Hinduism before it became too compartmentalized, which kind of says that there are no two separate things. Like the core tenets or the core principle would be that the God or like an entity, let's say, that guides everything, and everything else that is being guided, it's all the same thing. Like, for example, let's say a concept of let's say a concept of mathematics, right? I came up with this, so it might not make full sense, but I'll try to.
Sure.
So let's say you are starting with a mathematical equation, and you have a certain equation on the left-hand side and a certain equation on the right-hand side.
Okay.
And once in a while, you will prove that both of these are equal using variables, right? Like in algebra and all.
Okay.
Sometimes you prove that both of these things are equal based on constants. And in some cases, we have to use some undefined things like infinity. We will use the concept of infinity to prove that an equation on the left-hand side is equal to the equation on the right-hand side, and it helps out in the calculations, right?
Yeah, sure. So where are you going with when in regards to humans and our relationship to deities with the analogy? Because I'm not with you there yet.
Sure. It's not about any particular deity, because I don't want to narrow anything, because I think that is what is wrong with religions.
Okay.
Like narrowing it down to any particular thing is where things.
I'm having some difficulty trying to understand what the point ultimately is, though.
Let me jump in.
Yeah, I got it.
Go ahead.
So let's say
hang on.
If you could use.
Shandu?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
Yes.
So atheism is a single position on a single issue. If you're convinced that a God exists, you're a theist. If you're not convinced a God exists, you're an atheist. Dualism isn't a problem for atheism. Non-dualism isn't a problem for atheism. Materialism isn't a problem for atheism. Supernaturalism isn't a problem for atheism. The only thing that's a problem for atheism is if there's actually good evidence for the existence of God, and if that's the case, then atheism definitely has a problem. The dualism issue is irrelevant because it deals with something else. Now, if you want to ask, as a skeptic, as a science-minded individual, is non-dualism a problem? No. Is dualism a problem? Maybe.
Okay, got it. But the equation where I was going with it is, if you could use a non-defined object like infinity to prove a mathematical equation, then to get to the final answer, if somebody were to discover themselves using
I reject math that treats infinity as a quantity rather than as a concept. So for me, if you're doing an equation, infinity can't be in there. I understand that I'm at odds with a number of mathematicians, but for me, infinity is a concept. And when you try to use it in an equation, you are making a mistake because you are quantifying something that is inquantifiable. So I don't know what your math example was trying to go with, but I'm going to reject it out of hand too. And I'm sure I'll get hate mail from mathematicians.
In the end, like we won't find an answer to infinity or anything. It won't be a certain number or anything. Like if the infinity gets cancelled out in the end, I'm not a mathematician too, I'm a chemist. But then if it gets cancelled out in the end, while giving you a true value, is that still a bad thing?
Well, it would if it's an accurate answer, then it's an accurate answer. So when it comes to math equations, there's no good or bad answer. There's just right or wrong answers. So I still don't understand the analogies. Like I'm not getting to your point.
Yeah, it's worse too, because when you say if it cancels out in the end, that means you had it on both sides of the equation and it was irrelevant. Right. So why put it in there at all? That's how things cancel out when they're irrelevant. Yeah. We're not getting anywhere here. I apologize, Shandu.
Yeah, I really don't understand. I don't even understand what your question is ultimately here. Like for us regarding our perspectives on things. Like Matt's right. Being an atheist is just the answer to a question. It doesn't inform you anything else regarding a position that either one of us or anybody else who identifies as an atheist might have. So if you're asking us what our perception on non-dualism is, instead of using the analogy regarding mathematics, why don't you just tell us what your perception of non-dualism is and ask us if we agree?
Sure. Like I was trying to explain my understanding of it, but then non-dualism pretty much defines a few characteristics.
Okay.
Such as it says God, as defined by the non-dualistic way of life, is about three things. It's about Sat, Chit, and Ananda.
Where are you getting this? Because you're now saying that non-dualism has a God definition, and this is the first I've heard of it. Now, granted, so why don't you email tv@atheist-community.org and send a link to whatever philosophical papers you're pointing to where non-dualism has a God concept, because I'm completely unaware of it, and I don't feel like spending time on it right now.
Exactly. I understand, Matt. You have gone through the organized religions and all, and I've
gone through the disorganized ones too, and philosophy, and I'm saying that I don't recognize the concept. These two concepts that you're trying to tie together, I don't recognize them as being tied together, so send me a link.
I will. Thank you for taking the call anyway. I will email you the link.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shando. Appreciate you calling.
Because if I don't know the concept. Yeah, if you're not getting the point, and I don't know how he's tying these two concepts together, then any conversation that takes place for the rest of the show is going to be a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
There's going to be a bunch of people who don't know what the hell they're talking about it.
Yeah, it was frustrating because I wasn't even sure what he was answering. He seemed like he was a genuine person, but I don't think that he had the communication strategy down to actually get it to me, at least. I mean, I could be thick.
Yeah, he didn't break my Zen.
You didn't break your Zen. I know. I'm so excited. Do you want me to what do you think, Matt? Should we attempt to break your Zen, or should we continue?
I'm not even looking at the call. I'm not looking at the call screening anymore. I'm just letting you pick it out. And if it happens, it happens.
This is fun. Okay. So we're going to
I think the one serious Zen break was justified. And I probably could have been a little bitchier with the dude that decided to just call you names, or the transphobe. But yeah.
Jordan, you're on the line. I'm not even going to say what you're calling about. We're gonna super surprise Matt because he's not even looking. So
don't harsh my mellow, Jordan.
Man, what's up, Jordan? What do you want to talk to us today?
Hey guys. Well, thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to ask. I come from a Catholic background, but something I've been thinking about. What do you think about the idea of? Do you think this idea has value? A non-sentient God, in the sense that it's a metaphor for everything good in humanity. So like humanity's greatest aspirations, our highest morality, goodness in society. Do you think that could have any value as a type of post-theism? So a way of framing our worldview, but it's not a sentient God. It's just.
So are you proposing God as an aspirational archetype?
Oh my gosh. I was hoping so much that you would say Ubermensch.
That's what he said. Jordan, what you're saying is God is an aspirational archetype, right? Is maybe a beneficial concept to have, and I have some criticisms of that.
Good.
I have several criticisms of that. For example, so whose concept of God, and how do we get to the point that aspirational archetype is in fact one that we can define as beneficial? How do we define beneficial? Who makes those determinations? And if anything in our society comes to change, for example, or our understanding of what is or is not good becomes a more expanded upon and honed in, so that we have better ideas of what is or is not good. If that is the case, and if we're looking at society through the course of history is likely to be the case, our definitions of what are and are not right and wrong, good or bad, they change over time, and arguably change for the better. If we're creating this perception of a deity as an ultimate good and it needs to have attributes that are to be aspired to, we would need to be the ones who make those attributes and give that God those attributes in order to be in that aspirational position. And once you attribute those attributes to a God as an aspirational metric, then you are essentially cutting off the opportunity for that to be improved upon. And if the idea is and can be improved upon, then there's no need to have an immutable aspirational metric for people to aspire to. We need to find better ways, because if society has taught us anything, is that God as an aspirational archetype or a prescriptive mandate for morality isn't beneficial ultimately, especially when it's perceived as immutable, because once our morality involves and it pushes up against those concepts, it causes a massive amount of dissonance, not just internally as an individual, but also amongst groups. So replacing it with a fake version just because it's been proven to have some sort of behavioral affect and that people will rally around it is, I think, looking at the wrong thing. What you're saying is because people will rally around this thing and we can use this thing to influence their behavior in a way that I would describe as beneficial, we should do it because it's good for us to influence people's behavior towards things that we think are good. And what that is actually a manipulation tactic in order to convince societies to behave in a certain manner that's been decided upon by a group of people.
Exactly.
That know what's going on in the future generations. And it maybe sounds like a nice idea, but ultimately in execution, and when you consider that it's just behaviorally affect manipulation so that you can control groups to what you perceive as being good or beneficial, then I think it starts to tear down. And I could say more, but that's where I stand.
This is why I was so quick to make sure that I added Shannon as a co-host, because I would point out that the God of the Bible is not a good character that anybody should emulate, and so that shouldn't be used as this. And, I've always said, hey, keep the good wherever you find it. If you find something good within religion, keep that. If you have some metaphorical ideal that might be useful, all of that stuff is stuff that I would have said and I'd have been right, but Shannon's more right and more accurate, because what you're describing is what religions are often accused of. Religions are often accused of being the manipulative tool intentionally constructed to control the weak and control the people, the individuals and all this stuff. To do it intentionally would take something that was incidental and turn it into a manipulative, immoral travesty. Why not just promote good characteristics because they're good? I don't need to package it in hey, look at this God, which probably doesn't exist. He's a really good character. It's like when I pick, you go in the dentist's office and you open up the copy of Highlights magazine and you've got Goofus and Gallant in there. That's a good way to perhaps teach kids with fictional characters. Let's not turn Goofus and Gallant into metaphorical representations of ideals when we recognize that things are more complicated than that, and that human beings can be taught and understand without manipulation, and that manipulation automatically weakens the goal that you're pursuing.
I agree.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That's a lot to chew on. Thank you.
Sure.
I almost do think that in this idea of the non-theistic God, maybe, or not maybe, for sure, we wouldn't want to prescribe any specific morality, because that really would just be impossible. Would it be helpful to think of it not as a specific character or attribute, but merely a finger pointing towards what you think is good? Or maybe that point is just too many abstractions of thought to where it's not even a useful concept anymore.
It becomes contrived, I think, at that point. At that point, it's so contrived that you're essentially just attempting to retain the idea for the sake of retaining the idea, as opposed to looking towards what might be a better idea. I think what we've demonstrated is that God concepts as a way of controlling behavior may be effective, but aren't ultimately a good idea. So just because there is some sort of affectatious or advantageous momentary behavioral affect that we can get people to get to X outcome that we desire by using this concept to manipulate them because they have this sense of existential dread if they do not, then even that in itself, like when you say it like that, that's essentially what you're attempting to elicit. You're attempting to elicit existential dread in order to manipulate behaviors. And that you need to, if you're looking from a moral perspective, I don't understand a moral system that anybody would agree upon given modern day standards of what is right or wrong and good and bad that would incorporate that as a component. A manipulation standard based on fear responses should not ever be incorporated into any moral system that I would get behind, whether it's contrived, real, whatever. I couldn't get behind it. And I don't understand why people are this Jordan Peterson effect where people see it as, it's this good thing. He's sold that there's this good thing about it because, there's this aspirational standard, and aspirational standards are good, but not when they're immutable and used as a mechanism of behavioral control.
I find it insulting. It reminds me, of like, oh, I'm not going to say that, because I'll talk to Shannon about this afterwards to make sure that I'm not dipping into psychology that I shouldn't be.
Yeah. Don't break my zen.
I didn't need anybody. I'm pretty sure I didn't need anybody to tell me that it was wrong to kill people or explain to me why they thought it was wrong to kill people. I'm pretty sure that is a simplistic enough thing that most people are going to intuit it. That there are some people with abnormal psychology who are not going to intuit that, but largely that's the case. And I think that even the people who are like, oh, I needed a God to keep me moral, are full of shit, because I think if they figured out that there's not a God, they're not going to run around killing and raping people. Now, there are other issues that are a little more complicated. And can we use shortcuts? Yeah, but I can't advocate for dishonest ones. The biggest reason being that if you convince someone to do a good action for a bad reason, when they find out that the reason is bad, what happens to them? Are they now wandering, floundering with no foundation? Give people good foundations for good things.
Yeah. Don't trick people into being good. Convince them why they should be good. Yeah. Explain it to them. Yeah. You wouldn't want that to happen to you.
Sorry.
No, you're all, honey. Go ahead.
Makes a lot of sense. Because in the God that I'm imagining, it would be...
That's my favorite way to say it, by the way.
Would be like say that one more time. Sorry.
The God that you're imagining, Matt said that was his favorite way to say it.
What about the God and say like Khalil Gibran's the prophet? Like it's more like mental incense in a way. It's not really like a sentient God, but it's more of a way to frame an atheistic worldview in a poetic way.
That book is literally on my bedside table right now. It's a lovely book to read. It's literally on my bedside table. I could actually go get it and bring it.
I can read poetry and be inspired. I can look at paintings and be inspired. I can see art and I can see messages, and I can watch an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and take a moral lesson from it without having to be told that any of the characters in there are real. I can watch episodes of Star Trek and easily determine that Janeway was an immoral fucking monster for killing Tuvix without having to believe that those characters were real. We can use stories and should use stories because that's what draws people in to put them in the place of those characters. But we don't have to lie about it. And that's the part that I'll never sanction.
I'd agree. You're essentially saying that these concepts are effective ways, like it's good to have aspirations. And in the past, it's demonstrable that gods have been an aspirational component of how people view the world. And do you think that I don't have aspirations, somebody who is an atheist, somebody who doesn't believe in God concepts, do you think that they suddenly become devoid of aspiration? Because if you're arguing for it, especially not believing that God concepts are real, if you're arguing specifically for their utility and not for their truth, then you would have to me, demonstrate that there's a reason why you should lie to and manipulate people. Because if you do not lie and manipulate to people, they will not have aspirations. You're essentially saying it can't be replaced with anything. But there's millions of people around the world who are atheists who have aspirations, who behave in accordance to what you would agree to as a moral standard, I would imagine. And proposing these as a necessity doesn't ever wash out for me, because once you put them under critical analysis and don't just think of them as nice concepts to discuss, then they start to fall apart on their face, because what you're utilizing them for either already exists and can be replaced with a secular standard, or is nefarious in its intent and should not be proposed under any circumstances, because the intent and how it will be used is not something anybody should ever do or want.
Makes sense to me, actually. Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel like talking through it helps clarify the thinking. That gives me some good stuff to chew on. So thank you guys.
Sure.
Thanks for the call, Jordan.
We're going to let you go. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate you. It was lovely to talk. And I didn't even get called a bad name. Jordan.
Well, that's what happens when you get nice calls. There's a couple of these that I think we can probably take quickly. Like, hey, here's my question, and then here's an answer. But
why don't you go? You go. Go take one, Matt. I'm going to give you the reins. Give you the reins. I'm giving you the reins.
Gosh.
You're looking now. You're in charge. My hands are up.
Sure.
Do it.
Greg in Ohio, you had a question for me about who I thought Jesus Christ actually was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Matt. Hi, Shannon. How you guys doing?
Greg. Good.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I'm fine with the notion that there may have been an actual historical figure there. I'm not necessarily sold on the idea. And so until it's demonstrated that he actually existed, I don't know that he did. And until it's demonstrated that what we have in the Gospels accurately represent his words and deeds, which hasn't happened, and I don't know how that could happen, I don't have any thoughts other than if he existed, evidently he was an itinerant rabbi that had a small following that eventually grew. That's about it.
Okay, because my actual question was based on something you had said recently, actually, that Jesus Christ was an actual person, or maybe there were several people acting as if they're Jesus Christ, which I understand what that means.
Yeah, no,
that's actually going along the lines of...
That's me in response to some mythicists, because I think mythicists, on occasion, make a claim that they can't actually defend. And so did Jesus exist as one person? Were there several people? Were there a collection of stories? I don't know. And so all I can do is look at it and say, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with Matt.
Which is, by the way, the fact that we can't demonstrate any of this to a reasonable confidence is already damning for Christianity in the first place, because there should be no question about who Jesus was and what he said and what he did. And yet the only way to answer that question is to just accept whatever you happen to accept out of a book or a collection of books.
Yeah. The chance that there was apocalyptic preachers named Jesus at that time frame is probably decent probability, but were they the Son of God? Did they resurrect? Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Right. I didn't know if you had actually done some research that maybe you found that, in your opinion, you felt Jesus was more of, let's say, a mentalist, or let's say a magician, or let's say like a David Koresh that like really believed he was some child thing or whatever he said he was of God, and actually it wasn't at all.
I think there's stories. I think there's stories that we don't have evidence to support that they actually happened, and I think some of them are patently absurd. I just did a video recently about loaves and fishes, and the two accounts of the two times people showed up, followed Jesus around, and nobody had any damn food. So let's get 5 loaves and 3 fishes, 7 loaves and 2 fishes, and turn them into enough food to feed thousands. I think that's an absolutely asinine, ridiculous, unrealistic story that no reasonable person could believe actually happened, let alone that it actually happened twice.
Gotcha. I tend to look at the Bible more metaphorically than literally, but I can certainly see the issue there, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the call, Greg. Appreciate it.
That's all I had, though. Thank you.
All right. Bye, Greg.
There. See, I told you I could do one quick. You pick.
In fact, yes, you did. You intuited that quite accurately. All right. Let's go with, let's talk to Journey. Journey. Uh-oh. Why? Well, I feel like you know something I don't. What do you think?
Well, if the call screening text mentions my name, then clearly somebody's got something they want to direct at me. And if I were you, I'd pick ones that don't have my name in the screen.
I'm actively trying to break your Zen, though.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm picking this. If
in
you
that
don't
case,
want that to happen, I would take the reins back. Because
in that case, Journey in North Carolina, you have been chosen by my co-host to attempt to break my Zen. So welcome to the show. How can I help?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you broke my Zen when you hung up on me the first time. It was a feeling of losing, that you lost your patience with me. And I was really so devastated that I stopped watching the show for a long time. I've come back because I wanted to bring some of that up. But again, my original point was to define terms for the sake of having a more coherent conversation.
Okay.
And I really like listening to you guys speak. If I was to have the moment to speak, the issue is the word God and what that means.
It means
and
different.
I was hoping
Journey
to have Because if your shtick is to have an acknowledgement.
Jeremy, I muted you for just a second because I want to make sure we're clear on something. We don't define God. Whoever's calling in to defend a God defines that God, and then we'll discuss that God, because God means different things to different people. And so if you have a God, were you literally just talking out loud the whole time I had you on hold?
It didn't even get to that point because
it did get to that
I'm not
point.
trying to interrupt.
I'm literally looking at the fact that I muted you. So tell me what God you're wanting to defend, and we can discuss it.
Right.
The word God. Simply the word God.
Okay.
No definition whatsoever. No definition whatsoever.
Journey, that's the stupidest thing I've heard all day.
Go ahead.
That's the stupidest thing I've heard all day, and I've heard some pretty stupid things, because now you're saying that you have a word, but it has no usage, nothing that you can use to describe it, which means that it's an absolutely useless term. So you waited all this time to call back in because you were upset that I hung up on you before, and now you want to talk about a God that doesn't have a definition. You're going to be really mad when you realize that I just hung up on you again.
All right. Zen broke.
Well, no, I don't think I broke my Zen. I think that was a justifiable. I think I'm good.
Okay, fine, whatever. Let's see if this one does it. Actually, this one won't. I want to talk to this person. Let's talk to Alex.
Yeah,
it didn't break your Zen. I really think Alex deserves our time. Hi, Alex. How you doing? Can you hear us, Alex? I know you've probably been muted for quite a while. Are you still there, Alex? We have you on the line.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Sorry, I had my headphones in, so.
It's okay. What would you like to talk about, Alex?
There's a lot that goes into my question, but what I think I'll do is I'll just give you the overbranching topic. Hope it doesn't sound too crazy, and then you guys can ask for more elaboration. I'll tell you about my backstory if need be. Long story short, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Basically, I needed help fully distancing myself from modern age spirituality. And there's a particular reason why it's hard to separate myself from it. The main reason is, I don't want to sound, drastic or dramatic, but I have certain types of mental illnesses, and I was raised in church and then left church. There's different reasons in between there and stuff. Had some troubles in my life, and then, modern age spirituality and stuff kind of helped me deal with those things. But now listening to you guys and studying stuff about psychology and especially cognitive biases, once you get into that, it's almost over for a lot of things. Yeah. But as someone that has certain mental illness,
no, I'm just agreeing.
Because it's like, as someone that, struggles with mental illness, spirituality has kind of been, just to use this example, an armor for me in certain ways. Like, my particular area I was born into is...
It can be a safe place to turn for some people until they realize that it's not what they thought it was. And then it can be more deleterious because they've lost a safe place to turn and don't know what to replace that with. That's a very real thing that people with mental illness struggle with when they come to realizations regarding how they think about, perceive, and approach religious belief. Sometimes it can be a haven. But I think one of I understand. I think I maybe understand a little bit of your point. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. When you're breaking from spirituality, particularly if you suffer from psychiatric disorders or other forms of mental illness, where a component of your perceptual, your world perception and your self-introspective perceptions are intertwined with your perception of religion. Once that becomes disentangled, because you've already been doing so much of the hard work of coping with the mental health issues that you may have, and potentially leaning on religion as a crutch, finding something to replace that spirituality component of your coping strategies with can be incredibly difficult. But what I would argue, and I think there's some evidence is correct, is that if you're utilizing it as a coping mechanism, whatever beneficial aspect you receive from it as a coping mechanism can be kind of shored out, and you can replace it with something that's a little bit more solid in its foundations, like something introspective. So you can utilize some sort of cognitive behavioral therapies. You can utilize free writing. There's lots of things that it can be replaced with, and the things that it's replaced with are going to have a much stronger long-term foundation that's built on something tangibly and provably accurate instead of and beneficial to you, as opposed to using spirituality components or religious components, which are essentially just kind of a plausibly sometimes effective, sometimes deleterious, maybe comforting idea that people have. Is that something that maybe you're struggling with a little bit?
A little bit. I'm trying not to be, well, I might as well just be direct so I can get to the point. I know you guys have had a lot of stuff. And I hear what you're saying, and that helps, but here's my only thing. Okay. I'm just going to say it like this. There's a whole, dang. All right, well, I'll be that called, bring it up. I have a whole, I'm just using this phrase as guardian angel kind of split voice. I'm careful to say split voice instead of personality to not make people be like, bum, 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 because it's, you know, everything's cool, right? Yeah. My only thing is this. I'm 31 years old, and there's certain things that I'm struggling with for a long time or trying to get back on my feet on, like trying to steady job, career, trying to find romance and things. And here's my only thing. Back when I was a Christian until 17 and left, and then spirituality from there, if I don't have those spiritual beliefs, then I'm basically left as a young man with mental illness who basically lucked or found his way to do enough hard work into, I'm not trying to be whatever, but meeting the females I did, holding down the job that I did. Like now, I feel like the fact I ever held down a job is luck. My mind is telling me the fact I ever, kissed or went to prom is like
what
luck.
Difference does it make? What difference does it make, Alex, if you were the recipient of some fortune? You made decisions, you took certain actions. You have to take responsibility for the decisions you made and the actions you took. You should also take credit for the decisions you made and the actions you took. And if some fortune happened to favor you, big fucking deal. That happens to everybody. I mean, I happened to move to Austin and get involved with a local public access show just as it was becoming possible to begin streaming it to the world. I didn't invent the internet. I didn't invent streaming. I was fortunate that my involvement with this show coincided with the ability to reach a much larger audience. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, but I still did the fucking work. So take credit for it. You're not just, if you remove the guardian angel, you're not left with, oh, I just lucked into it. What you do is if you keep the guardian angel, you don't get to take credit or responsibility for anything. It was all the divine inspired. That'd be like me saying that, clearly I worked out a deal with the devil. And that's what, helped popularize the show. And I'm sure people would believe it, but it doesn't make it true.
Mm-hmm. You probably heard people. Sorry, but you probably heard people say such things before in random emails or, anyway.
All the time.
Alex, I don't think that you should be caught up on the fact that I just want to make sure that what you're saying is not that when good things happen to you, if you have to look at them through the lens of you just being the only one around, then maybe you didn't deserve them or do anything to enact them. Like, did you previously think that there was a spiritual hand guiding you and you were giving that the credit as opposed to yourself and how you behaved and having that sort of internal self-confidence? And now that a spiritual aspect is slowly starting to fade away, you have to start attributing it to either yourself or to chance, and that's something that's complex for you?
Well, it's not even that it's complex, because I've worked hard on different things before. Like martial arts, it was pretty easy to see, right? You punch just in the air, and then you get beat up. And then you wear like more weights and punch with dumbbells, and then you don't get beat up because you worked hard. But the thing is, but just an example, right? Just raw physical, this realm. But here's the only, I'm trying to say it and get to the point that's like, if there's no angels, if there's no gods, if there's no nothing, if I've been talking to a guardian, I'm trying to whisper because I'm in my parents' house and stuff, but if there is no such thing as spirituality, then that means I've been talking to myself and giving myself advice for all these years. Now, like you said, I worked hard on that advice, but I'm trying not to be that guy on the air, but like, can you see how that can kind of give me some I don't want to say breakdownage, right? But something to realize that you're basically.
It sounds like you're lacking in self-confidence and a capacity to appreciate the fact that your thoughts definitely have value to you and are the results of thinking, and that they're not always going to be correct. I know some people who never take credit for what they do, because the second they do that, it means that they would also have to take responsibility for what they do. And so there's this comforting thing that if you think it's all being guided from on high, that now you're no longer to blame when things go wrong. And if that means you don't take credit, oh well, you've subjugated yourself before the higher power, and it's all part of God's plan. And that's really freaking convenient, except that there's no evidence that it's no good evidence that it's actually true, and there's considerable evidence that it's not true. And so while you're kind of uncomfortable coming to the point of giving yourself credit, granted, I'm suspicious as to how much of it is based on the recognition that you will also have to take blame.
Okay. Also, I'm hearing you say something that I've grabbed a pencil. Apparently, I love this. So I'm hearing you say something that I really want to hammer home to you, that I've heard other people say before when they come out of religious ideologies, because they don't have this sort of recognition that all of us have this internal monologue, and it manifests in many forms. You've said you've had some sort of mental illnesses. I'm not sure if you have DID. That could be something that's plausible. Hopefully you're pursuing treatment, but that doesn't even need to necessarily go to that extreme. So I did a video actually a while ago called, it's actually pinned to the top of my channel if you'd like to go have a look. And I'm not saying that you should have a look and watch the video just for the sake of getting the view, but there's also many, many studies that I linked in the description of the video. And those studies have to do with how we attribute the affect of our internal monologues. So we have we all talk to ourselves for the most part, unless you have a disorder, that about what we're doing. We have this running monologue in our mind that we can kind of interact with, so we can have an effect to it. Now, if you have a religious ideology, if you have a religious belief, for some people will attribute the other side of that internal monologue to them being able to communicate with God. But really, it's the same internal monologue all of us have. It's just a misattribution error. Some people are labeling that internal monologue we all have as a deity, and some people have this understanding and recognition that we all have this sort of internal monologue. Now, if you gave that internal monologue attributes, it's incredibly feasible, and it's not even super uncommon to start to assign it attributes. And maybe even it have some sort of individualized personality during interactions. If that becomes too compartmentalized, then it can become disassociative, and that is an issue. And that's something that, irrespective of whether or not you are somebody who is spiritual, you really should seek some sort of counseling and diagnostic therapy regarding, because it could become a bigger issue later on down the line. But if it is like a lower order internal cognitive dialogue that you're having, that we all have day to day, and you're just assigning attributes to the other side of that introspective monologue and labeling it a dialogue instead, it's not something that you should be concerned about or afraid about. And because religion gives you this scaffolding where you have this priming preconception, it's already framed psychologically that you're going to be able to have some sort of communication standard with this deity that cares about you, for example, then it's very, very, very common that people will use their internal biases, and you said you studied biases, in order to give that aspect of their internal monologue those specific attributes, because they have this expectation that that's a thing that's going to happen. They're looking for it to happen. And this component of how our cognition already functions can kind of be a stand-in for that. But it's not delusional thinking necessarily. It's just a false hit. It's a false positive.
On that note... Yeah. So on that note, Alex, we're gonna put an end to the show here in just a second. I want to make sure that you mention this. I actually watched a video on people who are saying that they don't have that internal monologue, but that's a separate issue, since by and large we tend to almost everybody has it, and there's some oddities. I'm worried here because we're gonna have to stop the show. Shannon's got to move on, and I've got to move on, and we appreciate the call, Alex. I just want to make sure that no matter what you think about what is or isn't real, that you don't fall into a trap of not acknowledging your contribution to your life, whether it's credit or blame. That's an important part of being a responsible, healthy member of society, is recognizing, there's that old canard from, I think it's Alcoholics Anonymous and others, which is, God grant me the ability to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It's still a fairly good thing, because what it's saying is, hey, there are things that I'm not going to be able to change in life. I'm going to have to deal with, pressures and conflicts, and I'm just not going to be able to fix it all. And then there are other things that I can, and it's good to be able to recognize that until you can get to the point where you stop giving credit to beings that you cannot demonstrate are real, and start addressing what you can and can't, accomplish. I don't know that you're going to find a way out of that. It's not easy, but I don't want to also just say, oh, well, you're stuck. If you're, that far gone, you got these spiritual beliefs, you have to just stick with them. No, that's not the case. I think you and the bulk of human beings are capable of transcending the limitations that religions have put on us. And I genuinely hope that you find the ability and the comfort and the self-confidence to do all of that. And we thank you for calling.
Yeah, Alex.
Oh, do you mind if I do one more thing? Oh.
Yeah, of course. It's because you've been a breath of fresh air. Yes, please. One more thing. And then we'll have to let you go.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you both said. The only other thing, I do need to give myself more confidence and credit for things I've done. My only question for Shannon is this. How do you tell how much, just to use the term self-talk because I heard it somewhere, how do you tell how much, well, let me use the proper term, internal dialogue. How much internal dialogue can you tell if it's just, because there's some things from my childhood that were less than ideal before this guardian angel appeared that might be a bit, what's the phrase I'm looking for? So the word is, how do you tell if it's a point where you need to seek help or if it's just your internal monologue with just to...
Is the internal monologue preventing you from getting shit done? Are you having intrusive thoughts? Are you obsessing over thoughts? If those are the cases, then you need to talk to an expert because then the internal monologue has become something else. But if it's just, hey, what do I think about this? Oh, maybe that. Oh, maybe that. And it's not getting in the way of doing stuff, but it actually appears to be helping, then as a non-expert, I'll shut up and let Shannon answer this.
Okay. So I'd like to expand upon that, actually, because if there's aspect of this internal monologue that you're interacting with or dialogue that you're interacting with that you feel is engaging in interaction styles that you can't control, if you see a demonstration that you're unable to control these thoughts or understand these thoughts or recognize where they're coming from, then, or even if you just have concerns, if you're able to articulate concerns, I would suggest having a discussion with somebody about it. It doesn't mean that you should be concerned, but if nothing else, it'll prevent a swell of anxiety regarding those concerns. Yeah, and a swell of anxiety regarding those concerns could be something, if it is a legitimate issue that needs attention, could be something that acts as an antagonist that causes a dissociative affect mentally. If it is something that you have concerns about, pursue discussing it with somebody more in depth, and it'll at least alleviate those concerns. Take care of yourself first and foremost. Like Matt's absolutely right. You need to give yourself more credit. You need to consider that you having these internal dialogues that you may have been attributing a component of your internal dialectics to giving it characteristics that is entirely plausible. But if you can articulate concerns and have in a couple of instances here, it's worth pursuing. No one ever said, golly gee, I sure do wish I didn't try to take care of my mental health. That sure was something that I do regret. Please take care of your mental health. If you have concerns, pursue them.
And you can reach out to Recovering from Religion and the Psychotherapist Project. Sure. Thanks to Chat for mentioning that. But on that point, Alex, we got to go, but we appreciate it. And call us back, let us know, touch base, and how you're doing.
Yeah, please, Alex. I'm sorry, I never shut up.
No. So I love the fact that you decided to end there by talking about how you never shut up when I never shut up. So what's funny is that people are going to have this perception of each of us. And yet somehow when the two of us get together and do these shows, it's the highlight of my week. And I'm very happy to have you on as part of the group. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. There's still time for you to click on the donation link above chat if you're watching us live right now. Every penny of that goes to the atheist community of Austin in order to put out this show and Talk Heathen and Atheist Vanguard and Secular Sexuality and Truth Wanted and all the other shows that are on the Atheist Experience Network. We're very grateful for the people who tuned in, the people who donated. And if you can't donate, by all means, you take care of you. And we'll keep doing what we can to try to take care of the world. Follow the health advice in your area. I'm still on lockdown and will be until August 15th. I fully expect the mayor of Austin to extend that because things are not getting better at the rate that they would like. But I don't know. But what I can tell you is that the ACA is going to continue to keep putting out content remotely, perhaps forever, if there's not another alternative. And we want viewers. So please take care of yourself so that you can learn from the callers who call into the show. Share that content with other people, and maybe we can I don't want to rid the world of mask holes by them getting sick, but I'd love to get rid of the mask holes by actually educating them. So Pastor Greg Locke, if you would like to have a public discussion with me about science and masks, I am at your jackass's disposal. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
I would pay money to watch that shit.